Hello, my fellow writers. My name's Laura, and welcome to Learn to Writer, where we learn to deal with the mental challenges of being a writer. And if you've been here before, it was a dark and stormy words. Our topic today is that big, scary monster writer's block and how to deal with it. But there's good news. Writer's block doesn't exist. Okay, video over. I'm just kidding. But not about writer's block not existing. If you Google writer's block, it gives you something along the lines of it's a condition where you can't think of what to write next. It sounds big and scary. People react to it as if it's big and scary. And the thing is that writer's block only exists because people think that writer's block exists. The problem with saying I have writer's block is kind of the same thing as saying my writing sucks. You might be having trouble writing, so it seems like you have writer's block. You might have written some stuff that isn't like publishable quality. But what you're doing when you say my writing sucks is you're not giving yourself a way forward, right? You're saying my writing sucks. What do you do with that? My writing sucks. I throw it in the trash. I have writer's block. I never write again, right? So really, you don't want to think about it so much as you having writer's block because, again, writer's block only exists when you think that writer's block exists in your head. When someone thinks that they have writer's block, what has happened is they do indeed have a stuck spot. That part is real, right? You're having some sort of a stuck spot. However, if you say, I'm having trouble writing right now, what can I do in order to help that? Or I'm having trouble writing right now, what exactly is the problem? Instead of I have writer's block and you're like, you can't move on from that. You're phrasing it as I know that there is an issue, and now how am I going to get out of that issue? So what we want to do is treat this like any other writing problem that you have, right? If your character's motivation sucks, we've got tools for that. If the plot is wandering all over the place and falls off a cliff, we have tools for that. If you can't sit down and write, there are tools for that. So instead of being like, I'm stuck, it's, okay, what is the issue and how do I deal with it? And part of diagnosing what stuck spot you have is just going to be a mental exercise. So we're going to go through a couple of the more common issues and then kind of drill down into them until we more figure out how you can deal with your particular stuck spot. So if the issue seems to be that you can't sit down and write, there can be a number of things that are going on here. One of them is you legitimately don't have time to sit down and write. Something is going on in your life. There's a holiday. Your kid is sick. You need to take the car in for its inspection. Just anything that is actually a legitimate time sink that means that you don't have time to write. There is also the mental aspect of that too, everything might be okay, but you're super worried about a promotion that you didn't get at work, or your mother is okay, but she's been having some health problems and you're worried that it might get worse or something, right? So one of the other things you want to do is check in on your mental state. And sometimes your mental state is just down because we all get depressed sometimes. And then sometimes there's actually depression. And that is not something that I can necessarily diagnose or anything like that, but you want to consider it in case it's not something that you have considered before. And even if you know that you have depression, you have to be kind with yourself about that. And it's also the same thing with ADHD in this instance, because sitting down and starting a task is one of the hardest things that I do, right? ADHD just, oh my gosh. And then I sit down and it's usually fine. If you're having a little bit of extra stress and your ADHD or your depression, kicks in, you want to be able to be aware of that and either do some things that you need to improve your mental state, whether it's make sure that you're on your medication, get your medication up, talk to your doctor, talk to your therapist, talk to a trusted friend, any of that kind of stuff. In a lot of cases, trying to force yourself through that on your own is really just going to make the problem worse. It's one of those things where these are situations where you kind of have to deal with them first before you get back to the writing part. Two of the other situations that can come up sound different, but really the way that you deal with them ends up being very similar. One is everything that I write sucks, and the other is I don't know what to write next. In general, they're caused by a similar thing, which is I don't know where the story is going, or something in the story is fundamentally broken, thus everything that I try to do doesn't feel right. And so then it sucks because it doesn't feel right. If we're in the everything that I write sucks place, number one, we've realized that when we say all of my writing sucks, that we are probably in an overly emotional space and we need to take a step back. And once we have taken a step back and acknowledged the fact that all of our writing does not suck, because it doesn't, then you can start narrowing in on where the issue actually is. Is there a character that isn't acting right? Is your plot not coming together? Is your character's motivation trash? Is your pacing all over the place and just stumbling? Is your writing itself clunky, right? Like, all of these are things where you could say, my writing sucks. But if you say, okay, my writing is very clunky right now, there are tools in order to fix that. There are things that you can go and do and be like, oh, okay, well, the writing is clunky because I used too many adverbs with ly. I don't know. There's definitely like ways to deal with clunky writing. There's ways to deal with character motivation. And then the same thing with I don't know what to write next. That generally is going to be some sort of a character or a plot issue, more than your writing or your pacing. Because it basically means you don't know what's happening. The story is not going in a way such that you can predict what is going to happen next. And so one of the things that you want to do is one of the same things that you want to do if you think your writing sucks and it seems to be a character issue is, dive into your character's motivation. There are so many tools out there for delving into your character, like questionnaires that you can do. Like sometimes I just legit sit down and start talking to my character and like I write out a question like as me as the author, and then I'm like, this character, and then I just see what they say. I got some pretty surprising feedback from that too when I asked my character's directly questions. If you're trying that and like you're not even hearing your character's voice necessarily, then you might want to do a little bit more developmental work on the character, right? Maybe you don't have them quite yet. I've definitely had issues with that before where like I try and write the character and it's all over the place, and it's because I don't understand who they are or what their motivation is at all. All you have to look up is character development, Google character development, and there's going to be so many tools out there that you can try. If the plot is just, you don't know what's going on with the plot, then look up plot structures for books specifically, and plug what you have already written into those structures and then see what it is that you still need. That can do a couple of things, but one of them is it can tell you what you need to do next. If you've gotten to your halfway point but you haven't had your next incident, I think it's pinch point, something like that. I always have to go back and remember, but like if you have your halfway point and you don't have the pinch point yet, then you need to write a pinch point. It could also be that you try and put your story into the structure and it doesn't fit at all, like you're just whatever, like and that basically means, okay, you need to go back and structure your plot because something is missing. Maybe you're missing an inciting incident and the whole book is flat because of that, right? The inciting incident is the point at which the character can no longer go back to whatever the status quo was before that. If you never have an inciting incident like that, then they can just say, you know what, I don't want to do this story, and then they just F off, and you don't have a story anymore because your character is not in any way forced to do it. Or you are forcing them to do it even though there isn't any reason that they should be doing it, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that could be going on with that. But if you know that the problem seems to be in the plot, you don't know where things are going next, then going and looking at structure can be good. And, if you look at one structure and you're like, okay, well, that didn't fix it, go and find another. There's millions of them out there. There's like the 3-act structure, there's the 7-point movie structure, there's a 9-point, there's like a 13-point or something weird out there. If your problem is structure, one of those is going to help you put it back into place. If you are at the 3/4 to 2/3 mark in your book, look up specifically like muddle in the middle or having trouble with the middle of my book, stuff like that. This happens to everyone. It is the bane of my existence. It's very difficult for everybody, and there's plenty of people out there who are talking about that very specifically. For many years, when I got to this point at the book, I thought that my whole entire book was worthless and that I was never going to get past it. Then once I realized, once that happens enough times, you're like, oh, okay, this is just going to happen, and I just have to like power through it, and you find a way to power through it. I mean, it doesn't really get easier, but you're more aware of it, and so it's not as big of a deal, I guess. Right? If that is specifically the point at which you're stuck, that is a specific problem that people have. That being said, if you're not quite sure where the problem is, you can always just write conflict. I know in NaNoWriMo there was a suggestion that if you ever didn't know what to write, you just have ninjas attack. That's kind of silly, but basically the idea is that you just introduce conflict and see what happens. Obviously, you wouldn't have ninjas if you don't have ninjas in your world, but like you could have like somebody's bodyguard attack, or a dragon comes down and raises a village or whatever like that. You're just creating conflict because conflict moves things forward. And so that could possibly get you out of your stuck spot. And really, like, one of the last things that you can try, and, it can be painful, but like, it usually works, is to just shut up and sit down and write. You just start pouring out words, you write whatever, stream of consciousness. I've done, like, going into detail about my world or something like that, and you just write, because eventually you get all the bad ideas out, and then a good idea pops out. Because your brain is always working on this stuff. Like, it's how we can write stories in the first place, is that your brain kind of puts this all together and logics it all together. And if you give it enough space, it will, most of the time, give you the answer. You might just have to go through, like, 5,000 words of like, nonsense before it's like, and then, we got to this point and the character did that, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the thing that I've been looking for the whole time. It can be painful, but like, when I've had to resort to just writing until something good comes out, I always do end up getting past it. But this was a very long-winded way to say that when you say that you have writer's block, there's always another issue there. There's an issue with your story that you might not be able to see, you might not be able to identify it, but once you start working on identifying it, the writer's block aspect of it goes away, right? You're having difficulty writing, you need to figure out what the problem is, and then I will find the tool to fix it. Just saying, I have writer's block, and leaving it at that is just passive. You're giving up all of your agency to writer's block, and you're stuck. I mean, like, where do you go from there? There also are, I will admit, you can definitely look up articles on how to deal with writer's block, and most of them are going to say a lot of the same things that I did, right? So, if you really want to be like, I have writer's block, then look up articles on how to deal with writer's block, because enough people say that. I just want to try and take that a little bit out of your vernacular, just because when you say writer's block, in a lot of cases, you're just giving up your agency. You're allowing writer's block to become a thing that is there and is looming. And like, if you say you have writer's block, even to non-writers, they're like, oh my gosh, oh, you have writer's block, right? Like, it turns it into a thing. You don't want to turn it into a thing. I'm just having trouble with my story. There's this part that doesn't work. I can figure out what that is. It's just one part of my story that doesn't work. There is always a reason that you can't write, and you just get better and better at identifying them and eventually getting around them. They're always going to happen. They're going to happen forever. You're always going to get stuck writing. Like, not every instance, like every moment of every day, but like, there are always going to be stuck spots. And the better you get at identifying them, number one, not panicking, and then identifying them and then working around them, the better you're going to be as a writer. So if you like this video, go ahead and like this video. If you want to hear more tips and tricks for learning to be a writer, then go ahead and subscribe and stick around. And I hope that all of your suffering is worthwhile. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.